If you've ever wondered how to invest in rental properties out of state, or if you've wondered if cheap properties or more expensive rental properties are best for your investing strategy, this episode answers it all through the experience of Dustin Heiner, an investor who quit his job in 2006 and has gone on to own 30 properties and evolved to luxury hotels and multi-unit buildings, but his favorite asset class is single family. Find out why in this episode. So Dustin, can you tell us about your business in 30 seconds?
Totally. Being a real estate investor, started investing back in 2006, bought property after property. Eventually I had enough properties to quit my job. Now I have over 30 properties, some short-term, mid-term, long-term rentals. I love long-term rentals, just cash flow coming in. Have invested in some hotels, as well as 355 unit apartment complex just bought last May. And so that's near Nashville. That's going really well. But think about all types of asset classes I like to invest in. But my bread and butter is residential, 4 units and below. Absolutely love those. And that's what got me to become successfully unemployed is my term instead of saying I'm retired. But yeah, that's how I make money and provide for my family is just from all my real estate.
So did you say you started in 2016?
2006.
Oh, 2006. Okay, got it. So what pushed you over the edge to decide I'm going to buy a rental property? And did you really quit after just doing one?
No, no, goodness, no. I had a wife and kids and stuff. So yeah, 2006, I started investing, bought one rental property, but I was working a regular, I call it dead end job. It's called a just over broke job because you're living just over broke when you're working for somebody else. And so I bought one rental property. And with that one rental property, I knew I needed to be an investor because I was like, man, money's rolling in or it comes in without me doing anything. But life was getting in the way. So I had a regular sit down desk job at a local county government doing IT work. It was in California. So I got the most risk averse job ever. Government, California, and IT. Those three are definitely not going away. So I got that job. But at the same time, I bought one rental property. But my wife and I started having kids. And so life started getting in the way. And this is really what shoved me to become a real estate investor. After my wife had our fourth child, I went on paternity leave. That's where the dad stays home with the mom, changes poopy diapers and all that good stuff and bonds with the baby. Well, 2 weeks later, I go back to work. And in that same week, I go back to work on a Friday at 3:30 in the afternoon. I get a call from my boss's secretary, like the top dog. She says, Dustin, would you please come to the office? And I said, sure. And I hung up the phone. I paused for a second. Like, why are they calling me the office? Like, this isn't normal. And I've seen plenty of movies. Friday at 3:30 is not a good sign. And then I started remembering about a couple months before I went on paternity leave, there was some rumors or some rumbling going on that there could potentially be layoffs in the county because there was trouble within, I guess, taxes. So, but I immediately shook it off. I said, there's no way. I've got 12 years seniority here. My bosses think I do a great job. I get raises all the time. So no. So I get up and I go down and I walk to my boss's office down this hallway. And this hallway isn't very long. In fact, it's kind of short. But every single step that I took, it felt like the hallway got longer and longer and longer. And it felt like my feet became lead bricks because the weight of potentially losing my job was starting to weigh down on me. Well, I get down the hallway and I turn the corner and I see my boss's door. His door is closed and I see his secretary there. Super sweet, nice old lady. And she says, Dustin, would you please have a seat? She's trying to console me with her eyes, kind of sheepishly grinning at me because she knows everything about what's going on. I know nothing about what's going on. So I go and I take my seat and I start thinking about my life. This whole plan that we're all told, go to school, get good grades, and then go to college or university and get in thousands and thousands of dollars into debt, then get a piece of paper called a degree, and you go try to find a quote unquote career, then work 40 plus years of your life, and then retire and live on 40% of what you managed and happened to save that entire time. Well, I started thinking, if I lose my job right now, did I just waste my life? And I'm like, oh my goodness, we just had our fourth child. If I lose my job, does that make me a failure as a father? Does that make me a failure as a husband, as a man trying to provide for his family? Well, as I'm sitting there, my hands get all clammy. My forehead gets all sweaty because the nerves are just crushing me. Well, the door to my boss's office opens up and out walks a coworker of mine. She's noticeably distraught, noticeably upset. She's not necessarily crying, but you could tell her world has just been rocked. She passes by me and my boss says, Dustin, would you please come in the office? So I get up and I come into his office and he says, here's your layoff notice. You're laid off. Well, I get laid off. Remember, this is the government. Nobody gets fired or laid off for the government, but I did. And this is the reason why I tell the story. So I take my layoff notice and I go back to my desk and I sit down and I think, and I realize two things sitting right there. Number one, I need to get another job. I need to be able to provide for my family. So I was really blessed, praise the Lord, to find another job in the same county. Another department wasn't having those issues. The second thing I realized, and this is definitely, I want everybody to listen to this and realize this. I realized that I need to make sure that this never, ever happens to me again. I need to make sure that nobody has the ability to take away my ability to feed my family. So right then and there, I started telling myself, I am an investor. Instead of, whenever we get asked the question, what do you do? I would reply just like we all do. Well, I work for the county assessor. I do technology. We're replying that our job is the value that we put on ourselves. No, my value doesn't come from my job. My value comes from myself and from my God, from my family. So right then there, I started telling everybody I'm an investor. And it may so happen that 100% of my money came from my job. That's not my part-time job. I'm a full-time investor. So I'll fast forward the story. Started working this new job, same department or county and everything. Started buying property after property after property, each one making me 250, 350, $400, $500 a month in passive income. After I had 20 plus properties, now I have 30, over 30 now. But after I had all these properties, I realized, why am I working here? So I go to my boss, new boss, good boss and all. I said, hey, I'm laying you off. Here's your layoff notice. And we, jokingly laughed. And he says, what are you going to do? I said, I don't have to do anything. I literally own real estate that makes me money without working. So the last part of the story, I walked home to my car. So I walked to my car the very last time. I've taken this walk 1,000 times. It's a 1.5 mile walk because I'm too frugal to pay for parking. I felt like I was walking on clouds because I knew I would never, ever need a job again because I have real estate that makes me money. And so for you listening to this, I want you to realize that you will never get paid what you're worth. And you are worth so much more than anybody can ever pay you. And this is how you'll know. They're paying you just enough to keep you working without quitting, but not so much money it takes money out of their pocket. If they paid you what you were worth, they would go broke. So instead, what I suggest is putting your life into your own hands. And the last thing I'll quickly say, because I know you got plenty of questions, it is more risky. I found the hard way by losing my job, working at the most risk-averse job ever. It's more risky putting your life in somebody else's hands rather than putting it in your own hands and doing something that will make you money. Where I buy one rental property, I have experts do all the work for me. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, I'm going to be making passive income every single month. And that's what I feed my family with. So I'll pause the story because you probably got plenty of questions.
Yeah, the most misconception people feel is that the job reduces their risk. They think that entrepreneurship is the risky thing, when in fact, it's the most secure thing, right? It's the most secure thing possibly to be in control of the decision of if you get paid or not. Whether you're at a company, you could provide them a lot of loyalty and they could actually need to downsize you as in their best interest to keep the company running. So it's funny how people think the job is less risky, but to me, entrepreneurship is less risky, right? And it seemed like you kind of came to that conclusion as well when your feet were bricks walking toward that desk. You knew what was about to happen. You weren't really sure, but you kind of knew. So it's a tough story to hear because I can only imagine what that would feel like with a lot of kids, but really glad that it set you on a good path. And I'm curious, how many did you have when you end up quitting that job?
I think it was like 22,
Rental.
23.
Yeah. So a lot of people run out of money when they're buying rentals because they have to put a 25% down payment. So like, what's the average price of one of your single family homes?
Yeah, I would say the average price. So I was living in California at the time and I was trying to buy real estate in California. But back then, prices were skyrocketing, very similar to how it is today. And you could not rent it and make passive income. And I realized I need to get out of state. So I invested in Ohio, of all places, just randomly found a place. And now I invest in Ohio, Texas, Arizona, Tennessee, and Indiana. So I started investing out of state because that was only just out of necessity. And so what actually was kind of sad, but I didn't let it stop me. My first property manager I ever got, because I didn't know what I was doing. I followed one of those quote unquote gurus, late night infomercials, and they say, we're coming to your town, free 2-hour seminar. So I went to that free 2-hour seminar. And then there was like hype and sales twist. They said, run to the back and go give us $1,000 and we'll go to a 2-day seminar. Anyways, I got suckered in this high pressure stuff. And so I did what they told me to do. But my property manager started stealing from me within 6 months because I didn't know what I was doing. I was following what they were doing. Then if I would have just hung my head and said, you know what, it doesn't work, I wouldn't be here today. But what I did was I realized that if I do something where I build the business and I get experts to do the business for me before I bought a property, That's the right way to do it. So for me, 22 properties was about it. Now, each one in Ohio, back then I was buying it for like 20 grand. Now they're worth 60 to 80,000
The
dollars.
property itself was 20 grand.
Yes.
Was it run down?
No, they maybe needed about 3 to 4 or 5, maybe at most $5,000. But remember, this is 2006, 7 and
Yeah.
8 and 9 and 10 when it really started going down. Then, but now they're literally $100,000 properties.
Okay, got it. All right. So when you bought a $20,000 property, were you buying it cash, or could you even get financing for a property that small?
Great question. So I asked my wife if I could take the money she saved from her before we got married. And this was in 2006 when I bought my first property. So she had $17. I took that, used that to buy our first property. Then, after a little bit plus the appreciation, I refinanced and pulled that cash out to buy the next property. And then I did it over and over again, just really started using creative financing before creative financing was really even a
Hmm.
thing.
When you said you took money she saved and bought the property and then pulled money out, how did you pull money out? Were you getting a mortgage, or was there some type of lender that would do a loan over many of these?
So today there are so many better options than I had back in 2006, 7 and 8 when I was starting to really grow the business. And I just got a cash out refinance. That's literally what I did. I found a local bank there in Ohio and
Okay.
just said, "Hey, I want to get a loan," and pull the cash back out.
Today, I've found it's difficult to get a mortgage under $100,000. If you get a loan under $100,000, it seems like the fees and the percentages of the fees are sky high because they just don't want to do the deal for that small of a size. But you're saying a private bank may have different leniencies and
Well,
different
this was
rules.
back in
And
2000 when I was really starting to do this heavily. It was 7 and 8 before
yeah,
the crash of 2008. So they were
yeah.
lending quite a bit pretty
Okay,
easily.
got it. Yeah, I got you. Well, that's really, what would a property like that rent for back then? I mean, like four or
Like
five.
500, 550.
Okay, got it. Huh, okay. So you had 20 of those, and they were 500 a piece. Some of that went to the mortgage. It's a tiny mortgage though. So you probably had like what, a 200 mortgage payment per month.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And sometimes I even pulled out enough money where I could, because in 2010, they were even cheaper, like $15,000 that I was buying, maybe even
Yeah.
$12,000. And
Yeah.
so I was able to pull out more cash to buy multiple properties at a time.
Yes. One of the things that I've kind of stayed away from lower priced properties is because if the property is $100,000 or if it's $20,000, it still has a fridge, and if it goes out, it costs $1,000. So that would be 5% of the $20,000 house, or it'd be like a tiny percent of the $100,000 house. So I've always tried to go on the higher side of the rentals. Did the properties you were buying have a lot of maintenance stuff that came up like that when a fridge would go out or whatever like that?
Well, I usually don't put a refrigerator in there. The tenants bring their own refrigerator. So,
Hmm.
but the other things like a range, stove, then yes, if that did go out, which
Am
it
I doing it
rarely ever goes
wrong?
out.
I thought rental properties always would have a fridge. I guess you could do what you want. Is that how you do it today?
Well, it really depends on the area that you're investing
Yeah.
in. Because if the comparable rentals that out there all have refrigerators and you don't, just like if all the comparable properties have two bathrooms and yours only has one, it doesn't look nearly as good. It's not going to rent as much. You're going to have
Yeah.
different type of
So you're
clientele, different
saying in the
rent.
lower price point, typically then it brings the fridge.
Yes. And so
Okay.
if you remember in 2006, 7, and 8, like my goal when I started investing, I wanted to be able to become successful and employed or retire early, quit my job. I didn't want to work for somebody else. And so I was solely going for appreciation. I was not, sorry, did I
Mm.
say that? I said that the backwards.
Cash
I
flow.
was
You're going
not
for
going
cash.
for appreciation, solely going for cash flow because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was investing in a really economically depressed area in Ohio.
Right.
So now, since then, like I said, literally diversify all over the country now. But back then, I was investing in a really rundown area. Now, I coach, I don't know, thousands of students now. I never tell them to invest where I first started investing because
Yeah.
it's still economically run down, and it's
Yeah.
really hard to find good property managers. Because for me, I don't want to do any work. I want to hire the right people, and when it's such a
Right.
low rent, property managers are not going to make much money. 10%
Yes.
on, $500, $600, $700 is not that much money for that type of clientele you're going to be getting. So now we get better Akron, Cleveland, Houston. That's these places, Tennessee, where I invest in.
Yeah. What's the average buy box now for what you'd recommend?
So there's two different types. Number one, this is for me. Now, I love 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 to maybe 1,600 square feet. Not so small that families don't want to live there. Not too big where it's extra walls to paint and toilets and all electrical outlets and all that sort of stuff. But those are bread and butter cookie cutter homes that everybody either wants to buy or rent. And here's the thing. I never buy a property unless I know my experts are going to take care of it. Now, this is the reason why I say this. I have a lot of people that come to me and say, "Hey, Dustin, I bought a property and I was following those gurus and bought a property, spent $1,000 to buy it, spent $1,000 to fix it up, then found a tenant and then tried to find a property manager." And I called property managers and all of them said that they would not rent it or manage it because they get shot there. Like, well, you no longer have an asset. You now have a liability. Instead, what we do is we build a business first and then we buy inventory. Our properties are our inventory. What I was taught originally, you buy one property and the property is your business. No, no, no. We build an entire business and we do not buy a property unless our experts actually sign off on it. So instead of saying, "Property manager, will you manage this house I already spent thousands of dollars on?" You say, "Property manager, I'm already working with you. I'm looking at this property. How much will it rent for? Will you manage it? What's the vacancy factor? What's the clientele like?" All that sort of stuff. They say they won't manage it. Then you don't waste your time and money buying it. But what
Yeah.
you do, if they say, "Yes, this is how much you rent for," you make sure your expenses are lower. So you have passive income. I suggest
Right.
$250, $350 a month in passive income. But like I said, when I first started investing, it was solely for cash flow. The
Yeah.
appreciation, one quick last bit, appreciation is fantastic. It's icing on the cake where I can take that. I never sell anymore, like literally never sell, because if I want access to the equity, I just get a cash out refinance to buy more real estate. And these properties, I will literally give these to my kids so that they can have cash flow and then buy more properties from those.
Hmm. I got it. I'd never want to sell anything either. The only time I've sold a property was because it was too valuable of a property to rent in the Indianapolis market. There's a cap. It seems like people don't want to rent properties over $3,000 a month in Indianapolis. So if I have a property ends up being worth $450, it's not going to rent for enough to cover all that mortgage payment. So I've had to sell 2 properties like that where I pushed it too far, couldn't find a tenant. But yeah, the sweet spot is renting for about $2,000 a month. I found in Indy, and I've held 18 now, some properties as long as 8 years. And the very best one I bought for like 195, and now it's like worth 400 itself.
That's
It's
awesome.
almost to the point where I need to sell it, but I just hate to, because I know it's going to appreciate even more in Carmel, which is the fastest growing city in the United States for many years in a row. If you look at the past 8 years, so it's still paying for itself because it's got the original mortgage on it. And so I'm just going to hold that thing for hopefully forever. But I just very much agree with your philosophy of not trying hard not to sell, you know?
Yeah, and I recently just bought 3 single family homes, and here's a creative way of doing it. I had one of my properties, it was one of my old primary residences, still had a home equity line of credit, $250,000. I was like, you know what? I could use my own cash that I have, but how much better using the bank's money? So I took that
Yeah.
$250,000, bought 3 single family homes in Akron, Ohio, and then the total rents is $3,600 for all 3. Then
Hmm.
now I'm refinancing it, DSCR, a debt service coverage ratio loan, pulling all the cash out. And I think I'm going to probably put like 20 grand back in my pocket, tax-free loan. I think
Yeah.
the mortgage payment is going to be 1950 for all 3, taxes, insurance, all the fees and everything. I'll be clearing at least $1,000 to $1,200 on all 3 of those properties, and have all my money back to go buy another property and do it over and over and over again. It's just when you start realizing that you can get creative in getting cash flow and then getting creative in financing, you just recycle that money over and over and over again.
Right. That's how you don't run out to build a rental portfolio is you buy it run down, you fix it up, then you refinance on the new value and you get back more than what you bought it for and fix it up for. So that's what I like to do as well, called the burst strategy. And that's cool to hear the evolution, man. I can't believe you started with a $20,000 property. Tell us about the hotels and the 500 unit apartment complex. Are
Yeah.
you a limited partner that you gave money to someone else who put the deal together just as a form of diversification?
So the hotels was friends of mine came to me and said, "Hey, Dustin, we're buying a hotel." And they wanted me to be a limited partner. I said, I'm not a big partner type of guy. I just invest myself.
Yeah, I like to be hands on.
Yeah, I don't know if I would ever personally go after hotels, but I've always played Monopoly growing up. And I always wanted to be an investor in hotels and have hotels. And so I think this is one option, one time that I can actually do this. So I invested money in a limited partnership. Now, the 355 unit apartment complex that we have in right near Nashville, Tennessee, I'm a general partner in that, do everything from asset management and all that sort of
Does
stuff.
that mean you put the deal together?
What's that?
Does general partner mean that you put the deal together?
So there's three other partners and myself. Two of them were the ones that got the deal. And then they brought the other two of us in as capital raising and asset management.
Okay, got it. So, well, fantastic. So, you're on the capital raising asset management side as well, right? You kind of help
Yes.
find other people to come to contribute to the
Well,
deal.
yeah. So my bread and butter is residential. I don't want to
Mhm.
have to get out there and be finding apartment complexes and stuff like that. Now, if somebody wants me, like no longer will I ever do limited partnerships. If somebody wants me to come on a deal, I'm going to be a general partner because I know how much money I personally bring, but then how much
Mhm.
money I could bring raising capital for another property. I think
Yes.
so my podcast is doing really well. I've been doing it for a while and just put out a couple episodes saying, "Hey, I'm going to be investing in a deal. If you want to invest with me, fill out this form and I'll come chat with you." I raised $1.5 million just from a couple episodes. Like, well,
Yeah,
this was
that's
easy.
awesome.
You know,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
I mean, when you've been doing it or podcasting for a while, that's just like your show. People listen to it and they're like, man, I really trust David. I like what he says and I'd love to invest with them. And so I was like, man, this worked out really, really well that now we have the opportunity just to continually buy more and more real estate.
So, having done some big deals, why did you say you still prefer single family?
It is so easy. I mean, when you think about, I just bought three single family homes. Well, and here's the reason why it's so easy is because I built a business that other people do all the work for me. And the financing is very, very simple. Now, when I talk about building a business, I say this all the time, everywhere I go, from coaching to podcasting and whatever. So we build a business, and this is what it looks like. So let's say you're going to start a convenience store, candy bars, soda machines, and all that sort of stuff. Well, you would not sign a lease on a location, open the doors, and set a box of candy bars on the ground. No, you wouldn't do that. You go out of business in 2 seconds. But what you would do is you would build the entire business first. You get the gondolas; those are the shelving units that all the candy bars go on, the countertops, cold storage, bank accounts, cash registers, insurance, employees, everything in the business before you buy any inventory. Same thing with real estate investing. For my residential real estate investing, I built the entire business once, got all the right people working in the business. And now all I need to do is just find another piece of inventory. And here's the fun thing: people ask, well, how do you get the properties? Like, how do you find them? I don't find them. People send me deals. Because remember, at the very beginning, I tell everybody I'm an investor. So I have so many wholesalers or other investors, even title companies sending me deals. Hey, this fell through. You might want to check it out because I'm an investor. And all I do is I buy it and then release my business, that all the people that run the business to
Right.
do all the work. That's why I say my bread and butter is residential because it's so simple. And I've done it so many times and coached thousands of people how to do it now too.
So, on the property management side, you had to get one right away because you were starting from California and you wanted to invest in a property that was reasonably priced and would cash flow. How did you find that property manager, having obviously not bought a property at one point? How did you find the first one?
So I did this and I never do it anymore, especially now with technology. It's so much easier and better to find property managers. So I literally flew in 2006 to Ohio because I saw a property and I just started calling just randomly people like realtors and said, hey, do you know any property managers? Flew in there and I never do that. In fact, all the 30 plus properties that I own now, I've literally haven't seen one of them like that at all. Just because I
Yeah.
now hire experts. But the first time I did it, I just flew there. I found one person that said they were a property manager and I trusted them because I'm a pretty trusting guy. And I said, yeah, go right ahead. But she started stealing from me within 6 months. It was really, really bad. Now, imagine
When you
you
say
created
stealing
that,
from you, what would she just charge you for light
made up
bulbs, and
fake
then you realize,
receipts.
oh, that
Yeah.
wasn't?
Yeah, made a fake receipts like they're $1,000 for the main stack going to the
How did you catch her?
drainage. And I'm sorry,
How'd you catch her?
things just weren't adding up. So you get a statement, and she would normally send receipts or a receipt that actually had itemized things out. It just wasn't adding up. It was really, you just had to look at it much more in depth. You can't just put it aside. You actually had to see,
Right.
like, oh man, there's
Yeah.
$1,000 here. There's no receipt for it, or this receipt looks really sketchy. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. So how did you fix that going forward on the next one and make sure that didn't happen?
Great question. So I fired her right away. And this is what I did. So imagine building that entire business I talked about, the convenience store, get all those employees and and they start buying inventory. But then you see somebody walking across the street and say, hey, you got a pulse. You say you want to manage, come on in, manage my inventory, manage my money, manage my customers, my employees, everything. No, you wouldn't do that. You'd hire very slowly. You'd interview lots and lots of people until you found the right person. If somebody says they're a property manager, you need to actually interview them. So my suggestion now, this is what I do. Now I coach with everybody to do. We interview at least 6 to 8 or more property managers before we pick one. And so here,
Mhm.
the little bit more in depth of what we do, we'll interview them at least 3 times, like each property manager. And then as one starts kind of rising to the top, like this one, I like this one the most. They call me back. That's a thing. Like property managers kind of don't even call you back sometimes, even when you don't even have them working for you. And so if they're trustworthy, they call you back. They have experience and they sound like they're going to work well. You have to interview them just like you would hire anybody else. And so that's what we do is we build the entire business, and then we make sure that the property manager, who's your quarterback, think about football, you have to have somebody that's going to be making you money, protecting you, and do everything in the business. That is your property manager. Everybody else is literally second. In fact, a lot of people, and well, I'll say this. So on my podcast or YouTube videos, I'm sure you probably see this too, the most downloaded or listened to or watched things are financing, like how to fund a property, and how to find. So fund and find. Those are the two major things. But man, those are great. But if you cannot manage it afterwards, if you don't have somebody else managing it, you're doing it yourself and your time is limited. So what we do is we find the property manager first, and then we use DealMachine to find our properties, and then we have our property managers take over. Like I invest out of state. I don't want to fly to see the properties. I want my property manager to go do it. I want my realtor to go do it. I want my inspectors to go do it. And that's how I make it automatic, because I just give them all of them the address. Here's the address. Go to work.
Got it. Well, love the story. Again, from just quitting your job, being successfully unemployed, as your shirt says. And you got some bruises along the way, which I think any good leader has. So it's great to learn from those and how you've better selected the quarterback for your rental property business. Anything you'd want to leave as advice for somebody struggling to get a deal? They've been listening to a lot of podcasts that hasn't quite got their first deal yet.
If you haven't got your first deal, it's not for lack of deals. Everybody might be thinking, well, it's a seller's market. It's a this market or that market. And they say, well, it's also really, really high. What if it crashes? There's always this what if, or there's always reasons why you kind of hold yourself back. Well, what everybody needs to realize is there's no good time. Like you can't time the market. You can't time it. But you got to answer the question, when is the best time to buy real estate? It was 20 years ago. The next best time is literally today. So you can't time the market. There are only good deals and bad deals at any time. So when you find a good deal, it's because it's making you cash flow, you're capturing equity, you're having your tenants pay for your mortgage, all that sort of stuff. And so it's time in the market that counts the most. So to help you to find that deal, because you might be thinking, well, Dustin, how do I actually find the deal? For me, it is telling every single person that I know, in fact, everybody who knows me ever since the last, I don't know, at least 10, 15 years, they know me as an investor. So deals come to me. So if you're going to do anything, definitely use DealMachine. DealMachine is going to help you do and find those properties. But at the same time, it's always fantastic when other people send you those deals, because they know you're an investor that's going to be buying those properties. That's how I got 3 properties in the last month, because people knew me as an investor. They said, hey, you want to buy this deal? I'm like, absolutely. Let's go ahead and do it.
For sure. Well, if anyone's listening to this and is wondering where they're going to sell their deal that they find, you could contact Dustin on Instagram and listen to him on the Master Passive Income podcast. And so with that, I just really appreciate you sharing your time with us, Dustin. And it was such a pleasure to come to your event in St. Louis this past year in 2024. And then, of course, meeting in Tennessee at the Mastermind a couple weeks ago. So thanks again, Dustin. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, David. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.